with Coolin and Cali, your guys, the first album on Geffen and everything, as you guys were working on that, how did Joe the Butcher end up being your guys' primary producer?
Well, you gotta realize that was set up through the label, through Geffen. And we got the deal basically through Mad Mad World. So Brett, who was one of the most talented people I know, him and Muggs were on their way to Philly. I was still in high school, so I couldn't go with them. And all Brett had was 16 bars. Period. He got an album deal, and the only thing he had was 16 bars written. So we went to Philly with no idea what we were getting ready to get into. And when Brett got there, we met Joe, and Joe just was like, all right, this is what we're going to do. And basically, Brett was very, very talented, very gifted. So he just did everything necessary. I was hardly there. If you listen to the first album, you'll hear remnants of me.
Right.
But I was flying in and doing those remnants. I would write and send ideas and stuff, and Brett will do it, or he would just do the whole thing. And he was phenomenal with that. So we wound up getting it through the label. Joe, he's one of the best producers, definitely one of the best mixing engineers I've met. His mixing is something that goes unmatched, and a lot of people goes unnoticed. And we need to give him his props for that, because with Rough House, although we had a lot of talents on Rough House, like the Fugees, Cypress, Crisscross, etc., the one thing that they all had in common was Joe the Butcher mixing that stuff. So he was able to help showcase and highlight Muggs' talents and abilities, Wyclef's talents and abilities, Schoolie D's talents and abilities, Cash Money talents and abilities, a whole lot of Philadelphia folks, as well as those who came to Philly to work. Joe the Butcher was really one of those pioneers that helped shape a sound, and more importantly, mix a sound, getting all of those muddy samples sounding crisp. He helped us we was one of the first groups to put live instrumentation into our music, and that was due to Joe the Butcher. So that's how we met Joe, and some of the things that Joe did with us.
Okay. Well, the thing that's amazing about your saying that is that you and I both know you better than me, but we've both been in the studio hundreds of times, and I've heard versions of songs that aren't mixed versus ones that are, and it totally can sound like a different song because it's such a dramatic thing. So I'm glad you said that, because I think people that aren't there or weren't there around creation of like studio quality material, it's a huge, huge, huge difference.
Absolutely. And again, I'll give Joe his props. There's other people who are definitely very skillful in those areas as well. But Joe, like I said, and you got to realize this is when you were cutting the tape with razors, and so he was excellent at it. Not to mention, when he was mixing it down, he kept the track moving. His in and outs, he kept the track moving, kept the transitions going, and I didn't know how much of a skill that was until I saw him at work.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, as we get to Coolin and Cali, the album, one of the things that surprised me as I listened to it and I studied it and all this back in the day when I first got it, back in the day when it first came out, was that more or less you had the Bomb Squad did the title track with Hank Keith Shockley and Eric Vietnam Sadler. So do you remember how and why they got the song that ended up being the title track, even though Joe the Butcher did the majority of it?
Absolutely. That was the hottest thing out. Joe the Butcher didn't have a name then. You got to realize, Joe and Chris blew up after Cypress as far as Rough House. Rough House didn't exist when we was there. So the hottest people were Public Enemy and the Bomb Squad. That's who did Public Enemy. And so when we had a single by them, it was a no-brainer. Problem was, Geffen didn't know what to do once again with hip hop, and they forfeited doing a video for that, which would have really catapulted us in a whole different way into the industry, because that was our first single, but it wasn't our first visual. And had they had the visual and the single go hand in hand, our career would have went a whole different direction. Because once again, I'll segue into this. Drums of Steel wasn't our first pick. It was the pick of it was the record label's choice. We didn't even, they came up with the concept. We want to do a Drums of Steel. And, and we was like, all right, but we originally wanted to do an actual drum, steel drum, but we couldn't find a steel drummer in Philly. That was just, most of them was in New York. So that's why Andy Kravitz, he was on the drums. But technically it was a song that they brainchild of this. Hey, let's do this. And so we again were making a sacrifice of doing what the label wanted as opposed to doing what we felt in our heart and what we think would have given us more momentum, foundation, credibility specifically in the industry, and would have been able to launch a lot more than what we helped launch in the first place.
So you're saying contractually, when you guys did the deal with the Shockleys and Eric Sadler, that they didn't include that you could release it as a single, or they just denied it? Like, what do you mean?
No, Shockley, the Bomb Squad had nothing to do with it. This was Geffen I'm talking
about. But why didn't they make it a single?
No, they did make it a single.
No, I mean a video.
Single. They just at that time, hip hop was new. It was even more. It was even newer in Los Angeles. It was the newest at Geffen. So they didn't want to make the investment into a video at the time when we did the first single.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we were like, yo, we got to do a video. We got to do a video. But they weren't convinced that hip hop was even a thing or that they wanted to invest even further into hip hop. So they had already invested into the single, into going to Philly and doing the whole album. So we had a significant album budget. So in order to get the Joes and the Hanks and all of that. So they were really like, Hank and Keith, the Bomb Squad. So they were really like, we put in a lot of money. I don't know if we want to do this. They were scared. So they put it out as a single. And because of the momentum that it got from all of the DJs and all of the people who was playing it, that's why they put out the Drums of Steel. But it was like, yo, you missed your window of opportunity because you should have had a visual to go along with that. It would have been an easy, no-brainer visual. Guys from Brooklyn sitting on the beach in Cali is all you had to do. Add some girls, some fine girls. That's it. It didn't even have to be, like Drums of Steel was all this production and we had a whole, it was all this. They put a bunch of money in Drums of Steel. They could have put a tenth of that into Coolin and Cali and it would have set them up for a better launch of Drums of Steel. Then Drums of Steel would have been a lot better received because we would have already had the credibility and the foundation that Coolin and Cali would have given us with the visual included.
I agree. Now with Everybody Get Loose, that one, Schoolie D, I was always curious and never understood. So did he produce the song? Because he's not credited as producer. They say Schoolie dropped the beat. It sounds like Schoolie D. You're sampling Schoolie D.
Well, you got to realize Schoolie and Joe, they kind of did P.S.K. P.S.K. was done in Studio 4. So how they did it as far as who got the credit and all that would be a Joe and Schoolie scenario, but they had been working with each other for some time. So Schoolie was just in the studio with us because he was partners with Joe and Chris. So they put out P.S.K. and so they were family. So he was all the way there. He had a studio right next door to where we was doing it. And so he was part of everything that we did. So he probably was in the studio and Brett was like, yo, Schoolie, drop that beat. And he dropped it. So it was probably a combination of the two, but Joe, Schoolie and Chris had some type of partnership and alliance to where they were one as far as we were concerned. It wasn't like Schoolie or Joe, but to your point, it was credited to Joe without Schoolie. So I don't know if that was part of their deal. I can't really say who did what and what did who.
Because also, it also was always curious to me when I was getting it too, because he's listed as a writer, but not the producer. So it's just all kinds of questions I always
But
had.
and again, that comes back to our lack of knowledge of the whole business at the time,
Right.
because producers at that point were categorized at a certain in a certain way, whereas writers were categorized, whereas it overlaps still, but it's just more clarity because people have a better understanding now. But that could be how they did it as far as what their alliance was. All right, Schoolie, we're gonna have you as a writer, we're gonna have Joe as a producer, because producer at the time was somebody who put the track together. No matter who included their elements or contributed their elements. So it was, I don't think it was deliberately done. No, let me take that back. I think it was deliberately done, but not because of anybody not getting the credit that they deserve, but not having a outline or a blueprint of what credits should have been given to what people for their contributions.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, on A Man's Gotta Do What a Man's Gotta Do, sequencing wise, after the first three songs start off so hard, that one takes a sonically, especially, it's just
Yeah.
all, it just, okay, what happened? But
No, no. Bam, bam. That was a live instrumentation for one. But let me tell you something about that song. The hook to that song that we didn't do, which in hindsight I would have done now, was I'm in the mood for love simply because my dick's hard. Funny, but when your dick's hard, you're in the mood for love. We needed to get clearance. They wanted 100% of the publishing. We refused. We was like that. We're just giving you the song. In hindsight, I would have. Knowing the business like I know now would have been a no-brainer. Give them the song. Give them the 100%, because that hook, along with you heard that was one of the funkiest tracks on the album, and just had a nice little vibe and tone to it, and the whole concept of the song and all of the lyrics that happened. It would have been a super successful hit had we did it the way we originally did it, because that was on the song. We did the hook and everything, but they had to remove it because of the clearances and the publishing that they wanted to clear it. And man, in hindsight, we did it. But that's what happened. It was just sonically, we wanted to do something different overall. We had different people who were doing different things. Like that was Joe and them. We also went out to New York and worked with Daddy, who a lot of people don't know how much of his catalog. He had the Stetzer, but people don't know that
top billing?
Audio 2, Top Billing was Daddy. People don't know that Daddy discovered Biggie. People don't know a lot about Daddy, but so we did that with him. Then we went over to had the Bomb Squad, and they did a single. So it was kind of like there was no rhyme or reason or formula to it. We was going out there, like I said, he went with 16 bars. So we were wide open to do much of anything. And that was where the creativity came. We were still living in Philly, but we're still going to New York every weekend on a train just because we was from New York. So we do our studio. And so the influences in New York followed us. So it was a lot of different elements that were combined in that. Joe the Butcher had all of the tools and resources with musicians available to him. And we were willing to embrace those musicians. That's the key to it. We were willing to embrace the different ideas and the different musical directions that they wanted to go in. And Brett was able to say, all right, yo, let's do it. And he was that versatile that he was able to go from the streets, that's how I'm living, to a man's got to do what a man's got to do, to drums of steel, to Coolin and Cali, to Hit 'Em Again, and they all had its own diversity. And what we didn't know at the time is that the uniform of an album, there wasn't really a uniform at that time. So we were just going in there like, yo, kids in the candy store. Yo, I like that. I like that. Let's do this. Let's do this. And we just put our work together. And that's what you see in Coolin and Cali, a design of it all just coming together in one place.
Be sure to check out the History of Gangster Rap by Soren Baker. He's official.
History of Gangster Rap features exclusive interviews with Ice-T, Snoop Dogg, MC Ren, the D.O.C, and dozens of others. The History of Gangster Rap, a definitive look at how Los Angeles changed rap forever.
In Los Angeles, the streets definitely set the tone of the hip-hop music.
At 19, I got a $50,000 car.
My whole angle always was, I'll be street, but I will always tell you the horrors that go along with this life.
There will be penalties and casualties for just wearing the wrong color in somebody's neighborhood.
And once gangster rap made it from the streets to the TV, the genre exploded.
With Fab 5 on your TV back with NWA.
Yo MTV, it just catapulted us from being local heroes to national gangbang rappers.
The History of Gangster Rap discusses it all from 1980 up till today.
It's always gonna be shit happening in the streets. You know what I mean? So it's always gonna be something to talk about.
The History of Gangster Rap in stores now.